that to live in a democracy is to have the right to govern, not simply to be governed, to rule, not just to be ruled, to be heard, not silenced, and to lose without fearing that winners take all. And this is the big one that I'm going to want to focus on here. I think you get the governing and the speaking, which I still want to complicate a little bit, but the big one I want us to try to focus on today is the idea that the fundamental value of a democratic system is being a loser in a democratic system. So if you expect to always win, to regularly win, or to mostly win, you probably ought to prefer a system of governing that is not a democracy. Democracies lose a lot of efficiency in the way that they make decisions. They're not particularly efficient decision-making tools. I occasionally realize that despite being ideologically committed as a feminist, my personality style is actually pretty authoritarian. So the reality is that feminism is as much a set of practices that involve a lot of meetings with very flat hierarchies in which people say all the words and vote many times. And I'm actually, as a matter of personality, more like, okay, we're gonna do this now. So to the extent that one is committed to the issue of democracy, it can't really be for efficiency. I don't even think in the short or medium term it necessarily means that one gets the best outcomes by any particular political or ideological perspective, because there's just so much friction in the system that gets lost in collective decision making. For me, the inherent value of democracy is that I am part of a group that expects to lose pretty frequently. Now, I suppose if we had one narrative or understanding of fairness, we would say that in a democracy, one ought to only lose about as frequently as one wins, but that is not typically how our systems, particularly systems that are built on and that engage inequality, can be. So I have here both my images of the 99% critique of the occupiers as well as the Tea Partiers, because the one thing I really love about the Tea Partiers, and I do genuinely appreciate this about them, is they just don't give a shit if they won the last election or not. They just don't feel that having lost or won means anything about their right to have a voice. So if you say to the Tea Partiers, well, you lost the last election, they look at you like, And that is, in fact, a highly adaptive and democratic with a little d perspective to have relative to a participatory, healthy democracy. It should not matter whether you won or lost the last election, whether or not you get to have a voice, because the idea of a democracy is that winners don't take all. They just take some, and that those who expect to lose at least as often as they win, and maybe far more frequently, ought to prefer a democratic system, in part because it ought to build in the sense that losers still get to share in the goodies, in the distribution of resources.